And we have an obligation also as shepherds, as we go out before the world. We have that just as we're called to reflect His light. Matthew 5:16 says to shine so that your brothers and sisters see your Father's glory in you. Well, as shepherds, as under shepherds, we have that same obligation to lead as Christ leads. And to reflect what Christ's teaching is for us. How He's leading us, we need to lead others. And I referred to us as under shepherds. We're not under shepherds in terms of the hired hand that Jesus talked about. We're under shepherds as brothers and sisters adopted into the family. And for that reason, we have a I can't think of the word now. But we're invested in it. We're invested in this world as believers, just as God is. And so we don't run when trouble comes up. We don't run and hide. I have to give great kudos to the family that owns Hobby Lobby. Yeah. And there's several others out there just like them, but they're the biggest one, the most well-known in recent years. Because they stood on their principles. They stood on their Christianity and their faith and said, we will not follow the Affordable Care Act. We are not going to supply contraceptives for our employees on their insurance. We are not going to allow our insurance to cover abortions. They stood on it. They're standing firm on the rock of Jesus Christ. They're not running and hiding just because they've been threatened with millions of dollars in fines or with having to close their business down. In the same way, we have to stand. We have to stand and be willing to take a bullet. One of my favorite TV shows is NCIS. And I think it was after the first or second season, they wrote one of the characters off. And they did it. She took a bullet for their boss. She heard the shot fired and she jumped in front of him so he would not be shot. As under shepherds, are we prepared to do that? Are we prepared to be like Peter and John and preach the gospel, and if we're arrested for it, keep preaching it? And we talked about Paul this morning too. What did Paul do when he was arrested? Him and Silas, in chains, sang worship songs.
Kept preaching and singing.
Preaching and singing. That's what Paul did. He kept preaching and singing. He didn't care where he was. I'd be willing to bet that if we could go back in time and stood over his cistern prison hole in Rome, the one he was in right before he was killed, we could hear him singing and praying and praising God. That's where he wrote, when he wrote to Timothy, he wrote, I have fought the good fight. Now it's time for you to fight the good fight. That's our job as shepherds to the world. We're supposed to imitate Jesus, being Christ-like. We're calling out to our friends, our families. And they're the ones that are going to hear us. And he's the only one who's ever done that. No religious leader, no leader of a religion has ever died great thing about Jesus Christ is he died, but he's not dead. He's still leading us as a shepherd.
Amen.
John 15:13. Greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. You know, I like to change that word friends to neighbors. Because that's what Jesus has called us to do. He has called us to go into the world and preach the gospel to our neighbors. Not just our friends. Jesus is the I am. Just as his Father is, I am. Jesus is the I am, the bread of life. I am light of the world. I am the gate to a life with God. I am the good shepherd guiding mankind to God. As his disciples, we have an obligation to do that, to go. That's all we're told to do. Go. We're not told where to go. Just go. You know, all right, the Great Commission kind of outlines it for us a little bit. Judea, Samaria, and the rest of the world. You know, which starts, you know, the start local, go global idea. But we're to go and tell the world about him. And more than just about his love, but about the fact that his love took him to the cross. And so will mine. And so will each believer's. Each believer is willing to go to the cross for him so that they may save somebody else.